Welcome to my space weather update for the 27th of June 2022. And today's story is about the geomagnetic storm that we had earlier. First, let's take a look at the summary chart that I put out on my Twitter channel first thing this morning. The sunspot number is slightly increased due to some new sunspot regions that have emerged. I'll show you those later. The planetary KP index, a measure of how disturbed our magnetosphere is, was at minus storm level early yesterday and has been disturbed for most of the day. It's since quieted down a little bit and we're at KP equals 1 now. The solar wind has dropped down to 450 kilometers per second. The GOES X-ray flux continues to decline. It's at B3 level currently. We've had a few minor C flares, and in fact we haven't even had a C flare so far today. We still have no data from the Solar Dynamics Observatory because of the power outage at the Stanford campus due to a local wildfire. We did have 5 C flares, but we did have 9 coronal mass ejections, a couple of which were quite spectacular, and I'll show you those later. We now have 4 new regions on the Sun. We lost 3028 over the West Limb while we were down yesterday. Active region 3040 is at the center of the disk and seems to have gained a few spots in the last couple of days. And the dashed circles on these images are where the new regions seem to have emerged. Now, we don't know yet whether they're going to grow into anything significant, but at least that's some progress from before. Here's my polychromatic image of the Sun. We start off with the photosphere at the top left with the sunspots and the equivalent magnetogram. We then have the H alpha view of the Sun, where you can see the prominences, those are the bright things on the limb, and the filaments on the disk. Those can lift off and produce coronal mass ejections. We have the transition region at 50,000 degrees with the helium-2 304 line next. And on the far right, we have the cool corona at 171 angstroms, which is about 500,000 degrees. We have the quiet corona at about 1,000,000 degrees in the bottom left. The active corona, where you can see the active regions and sunspot regions very clearly. These are the bright areas at 2,000,000 degrees from the 284 angstrom channel. And then we have the flare channel, which there's not been any really significant flares over this time. We have the flare channel at several million degrees, but because there haven't been many flares, it's rather similar to the active corona channel. On the far right, we have a hybrid image of the 2 coronagraphs on SOHO. The C2 is the red field of view in the middle, that's a high resolution field of view. C3 is the blue field of view around it. And you can see the top left at about 10 o'clock, there is a CME being blasted off the Sun. That's that big bubble. There's even more spectacular one earlier in the day, again, that I will show you. If you put all these elements together, you get this color-coded chart or map. There aren't very many flares, so you don't see that pinkish color. There's quite a lot of quiet sun with the blue colors. There are a couple of coronal holes, but they're very, very difficult to see against the blue background. There's one in the bottom left, for example. The prominences and filaments are shown in orange colors, and you can see those. There's quite a few of those about. And the bright regions, so-called active regions, are spattered all across the Sun, particularly near the west limb where the big regions recently went over the limb. And then we have several new regions popping up across the disk. As I said earlier, the X-ray background has been steadily falling, which is not a good sign. That usually means there's not a lot going on the Sun. But just to be awkward, the Sun has produced a C flare while I've been producing this video. So we have had one C flare today. You can see it at the far right there. It actually peaked at just about this time. Here are images of the 2 major coronal mass ejections that have occurred in the last couple of days. And I'm going to show you a video of that time period. You may want to play through it several times to see all the various elements there. The first one is almost off the south limb of the Sun and is very bright. The other one is a lot fainter and off the northeast limb. The solar wind has been highly variable. The magnetic polarity, BZ, that's the vertical component of the interplanetary magnetic field, has been bouncing positive and negative for several days now. At the moment, it's sort of settled down near zero, so it looks as though we're going in for a quiet time for a bit. The speed of the solar wind is round about 500 kilometers per second. That's down quite a bit from where it was yesterday, but nonetheless, it's still a healthy speed. The density of the solar wind has dropped significantly. It's down to about 1 particle per cubic centimeter, which is about a third of where it was. And the temperature is slightly eased up. It was at almost exactly 100,000 degrees. It's now near 200,000. That's not particularly significant. When the solar wind moves out into interplanetary space, we need to keep an eye on it because it actually changes with its passage through that medium. And in fact, to decode this image a bit more than I've done in the past, we have density as the top two images. The one on the left is the plan view, i.e. we're looking down on top of the solar system. The sun is that yellow dot in the middle. The Earth is the green dot off to the right. The one to the right of that is the side view with the sun on the left-hand side and the Earth on the right. And you can see how the density varies. The second set of images are the same sorts of things, but for the radial velocity. That's probably more important to us. You can see at the moment in the left hand of those two images, we're in a relatively low speed area, and we'll be approaching a faster speed arm of the solar wind in the next day or two. Most of the high speed solar wind has gone to the south of us, fortunately. So we have had a geomagnetic storm at the end of the 25th and beginning of the 26th. After that point, the KP index hovered around about 4 for basically a day. It means it was disturbed, but it wasn't in storm mode. And the last few hours, the KP index has settled down quite a lot, and it's at a very low value of 1. The storm did produce some nice aurora. There's some pictures taken by amateurs around the world shown here. It wasn't a strong storm, so it's not going to make many headlines, but it still produces some very pretty effects. So in summary then, the sun is very quiet at the moment. Some new spot groups have emerged, and the question is, will they continue to grow over the next few days? There have been relatively few significant flares, but we've had some nice coronal mass ejections. The high-speed solar wind stream did cause a weak geomagnetic storm yesterday, but things have quieted down since. So once again, thank you for watching the video. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.